Hey, this is Mark Pattison back again with another fantastic episode of Finding Your Summit. And this week we've got Tafa Jefferson, and he is the CEO of Amada Senior Care. And the thing that makes this guy so remarkable is this is a good story. All right, so this is a guy that grew up in Northern California. He didn't start playing football until his senior year of high school. Then he went out to hoping to get recruited. Some things fell through, ended up kind of meandering his way up until going to the University of Pacific. His senior year, they ended up dropping the football team. Can you imagine that, going to a school where they dropped the football team? That'd be amazing. It didn't happen to me at the UW. So anyways, this guy ended up ultimately getting a free agent deal with the Chicago Bears, but then ankle and shoulder injuries forced him to retire early. So he ended up in a situation like so many guys, you know, your whole life you've been building up to play a certain sport, and then you just kind of go off the cliff. It happened to me. I can totally relate with this guy. But sitting down with his mom, who's in the nurse caring business, she suggested that he get into the senior healthcare biz. And so he did. And today he's got franchises all over the U.S. The thing is rocking. And the best thing about all this is that he's reaching back, he's paying it forward, and he's helping other football players really find their way going forward. So many guys are lost when they get done playing ball. And so this guy has been a total advocate and stud. So, you know, great conversation, very upbeat, good guy, and it was really fun to talk to. So on another note, we continue to get sponsored by violetsorblueskincare.com. Awesome. All about Cynthia Besteman going through a rough time herself, overcoming breast cancer, and then discovering all these natural ingredients. I use all the stuff. It's fantastic. Check them out. violetsorbblue.com. Actually, violetsorblueskincare.com. Make sure you get that skincare in there. And as always, if anybody wants to find out about what's going on with me, I've got a new e-learning course coming out. I've written a playbook. I've got a journal, and I've got another book called Finding Your Summit, which is a compilation of short stories from all these different podcasts that we put together. So that book is coming out in early fall, and I will keep you posted on that. So on that note, let's go talk to Tafa Jefferson. Here we go.
Hey, everybody. It's Mark Pattison back again with another fantastic episode of Finding Your Summit. And this week, I'm very pumped up because I have a former football player, a former NFLer on the line with me today. And we're not going to talk about some sob story. This is a success story of a guy who has been able to successfully transition life after football. It's such a struggle for so many people. Anyway, today I have on the pod Tafa Jefferson. Tafa, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah. So let's go back, and we're going to get into what you're doing today. And certainly I know that you went through your struggles getting into the NFL due to injury. We'll talk about that and how you kind of popped out of it and what you're doing. But, you know, you're a pretty big guy, 6'6", 300 pounds at probably your peak when you played at, I think, Pacific. So what was your path in terms of growing up to have an affinity for football? You knew that was your path, and then you got recruited, and you ended up playing at Pacific.
Yeah, well, born in Los Angeles, raised there until I was about 12 or 13, and in my family there were 4 boys, and my father was an entrepreneur. Just the element was getting, it was getting rough to raise 4 boys. We grew up in Ladera Heights, and so my father had moved us out to Orange County, California, and he was really big into sports and school, and he said, hey guys, I really want you guys to take up sports, and a couple of my brothers did. I decided not to. Unfortunately, I was getting into a lot of trouble. And eventually, I had a experience where it forced me to really think about what I wanted to do with myself, and whether I had to make a decision whether I was going to be a productive member of society versus getting in trouble. And from that point forward, I just jumped into sports, and it was a couple of years after. I think I was about 15, 16 when I really made the decision to commit to really buckling down with the books and studying and really applying myself with sports. And so I was always a basketball player, but I was tall, and I didn't find football, believe it or not, until my senior year in high school.
Wow.
So I was a tall kid, and I was athletic, but basketball was my love. But I stumbled onto football.
So did you get any kind of letters, recruitment in basketball, or how did that play for you to take a path from your high school you're going to the University of Pacific?
Well, what happened was I just loved playing basketball. I wasn't even a great basketball player. I just was tall, and I enjoyed rebounding, and I just loved the physical aspect of it. My brothers played football, and my younger brother says, he's like, you should just come out and play, and I did. My senior year, I went out and played, and I realized that you can have a lot of contact with people and not get in trouble for it. I really took to football. I was a second team county player in football, and it was just my first year playing. I quickly realized, hey, I should take a stab at this and try it out in junior college. And I was getting some letters of interest from Division II and Division III schools, but the long and the short of it is I went to junior college. I committed to Washington State verbally, and then at the last minute I pulled out and went to University of Pacific because they were interested in my younger brother. So we ended up both getting scholarships to University of Pacific. It was kind of a package deal. And from there, I played a couple years. And as you know, the football program was closed down. My last year, I transitioned as a free agent to Chicago.
Okay, I got it. So, first of all, you made the wise decision not to go to Washington State. I went to the University of Washington. I am a Husky, and I do not have fond affiliation with the Cougars.
Apple Cup.
Apple Cup. So we had a great rivalry, and I played with a bunch of Cougs in the NFL, and they're all good guys, but there's always been that jabbing back and forth. But I'm sure that would have made a great choice. I can't imagine, when I went to the University of Washington in my day, and fortunately there seems like they're coming back now with Coach Peterson, but back in the day we were on fire, and we were talking about filling up 70,000 people, and always on TV. We were, I think, number one. I was there for 5 years playing. We just had tremendous amount of success always in bowl games, and I can't imagine what that would be like to be going to your school and they shut your football program down. I mean, it just doesn't seem right.
It was tough. There were talks about it, and when we were playing, I mean, we that was the year we played Nebraska, and they had the national championship team. And we played on the road in Nebraska. So we were trying to generate revenue, and we were a small private university, 3,000 student population. And we had some big games that we played to generate revenue. But at the end of the day, we just couldn't sustain, the program. So it was a business decision, and they made it. And the funny thing about it is my younger brother, the very next year, he transitioned into Washington State, and they went to the Rose Bowl like 2 years later. So it was interesting. So we both came full circle.
Yeah, I think that would be the Ryan Leaf years, correct?
Yeah, it's funny. Funny you mentioned Ryan Leaf. I was on my recruiting trip with Ryan Leaf, so we both tripped together. And I remember it like it was yesterday. Donnie Sasa, who was a defensive tackle, was my chaperone, and we had a great time. But yeah, I was with Ryan Leaf, and I thought I was going to go there. Coach Price was the coach, and I thought I was going to go there, but at the last second, when Pacific came in and they said, hey, we have an entrepreneurship program that we're starting here. We know you're interested in business. I had to make the best decision for me, and plus they threw in another scholarship for my younger brother, so we had to change gears and stay in California.
Yeah, well, I want to get into your business school entrepreneurship thing here in a second. I just want to add it to a number of months ago. I was at a gym that Jay Glazier, the color analyst, on Fox, and he's got a gym up in LA, and so I was up there, and they've got this program that they have for former military guys coming out trying to find their kind of the next step, and former, mostly NFL players, again, guys trying to transition out. And so I went up there to meet some people and speak and work out and those things. And I ran into Ryan, and so I worked about a number of times up there and got to know him, and I gotta give him credit for all the trouble that he's got himself into. For those people who don't know who Ryan Leaf is, he was the number 2 draft pick, many years ago, the same year that Peyton Manning was drafted. Peyton Manning would go on to become a Hall of Famer, and Ryan Leaf was out of the league in a couple of years and got into a lot of trouble, had a drug dependency issue, and he's really turned it around, and it's so great to see that he's had the full-on humble pie. He's learned from his mistakes. He lives day to day like many of these guys do, and he seems to be making a lot of right choices right now. So I was just, so happy for him. I had to rib him a few times about being a Cougar, but beyond that, he's a guy that seems to be on the right path and really telling his story and, putting himself out there. So I applaud that. So let's go back to, so now you're going on to this, entrepreneurship. Was it a business school or was it a additional set of classes? Like, what was that?
Yeah. So it was the Eberhard School of Business, and that is what really piqued my interest in the school, because I wasn't even interested in doing a trip to Washington State. I mean, to any other schools after visiting Washington. And, I had offers from Iowa, Kansas State. I mean, I had some schools, but I didn't want to go back east. So the long and the short of it is when they realized that I was interested in business, and I had my dad really influencing me, telling me, hey, you really should consider going to a school where if you get injured, you're going to have a plan after your injury. He said, son, that's the way you need to be thinking. And so the long and the short of it, I came in, took a look at the business school, and I said, this is where I need to be. And it was the best decision I ever made.
Hindsight's always 20/20, and you never know how these things are going to play out. And it certainly seems that was the case in your situation. I read something along the way that as you now were starting to merge out, there was a lot of encouragement by your mother to get into the senior healthcare field. And when you came out of Chicago with the Bears, you had ankle and shoulder injuries. And it just, shut things down before things really got going. So you had to make some kind of life decision about what direction you were going to go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened was I was in a preseason game with, I think we were playing the Bills. I rolled my ankle and I did a really, really good job of that. And then that was a year that they acquired the rights to NFL Europe. They ended up having a draft that year, and I think I was a 4th player picked in the first round. Shipped me off to Florida, where we were having training camp, and then I damaged a capsule in my shoulder during practice. And so, they ended up sending me to Alabama for several months to get some rehab. And it was during that time that I had a moment to really be with myself and reflect. Hey, okay, what's the next move? What do you want to do? At the time, I was dating my girlfriend from high school, and I decided it's time to get married, it's time to settle down, it's time to get a job. I had to make a decision whether I was going to apply what I've learned and what I've accumulated over the years, or whether I was going to go into more of a corporate role. And so I had some options. I didn't have a whole lot of money, because you're really not in the money in your first, second, or third year. I had practically nothing. Spending a lot of time with myself, reflecting, trying to figure out what the next move was going to be, was much needed at that particular point in my life.
You just said something that was really interesting about being with yourself to kind of figure those things out. And I know that I went through kind of a rough patch for, last 10 years or so. And, it was really this, it wasn't the entire time. I was going through a breakup with my ex, and I'd moved down to California, from Seattle, and it just forced me into, having a boatload of time to really think and contemplate about what my next moves were going to be. And so, I've emerged out of it fine, and financially I wasn't in any kind of a pinch because I was working always, but it was just emotionally, like, how do I get myself out of this and on the right track and leading a purposeful life in the way that I should be. And the best thing that ever happened was that I was not in Seattle. I wasn't around my 1,000 best friends. And then I was, spent a lot of time in solitude. And it sounds like that's what you had done as well to really elevate, what your next move was going to be?
Yeah, Mark, it's so interesting. I think right now in today's age, with technology and whatnot, it's so easy to have our noses buried into our phones or in our laptops and thinking about, a planning and kind of calendaring. I'm very regimented. I'm very organized, and I like to know what's ahead of me. Having that time of solitude to really reflect and think, okay, I'm 23, 24 years old. I still have my head together. I'm in decent shape. I've got the next 60, 70 years in front of me. What am I going to be when I grow up? I think we all need to have that conversation, with ourselves. And, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about purpose. And again, I just want to give a shout out to Ryan Leaf because I am up to speed with what he's doing with his life. And I think he's a huge inspiration and a great example of crashing and burning and then resurrecting yourself to be, to becoming a better man. And so I'm aware of the nonprofit work that he's doing out there in the community, and I think it's fantastic. But, to get back to my original point that I was making, I think we all need to spend some time to reflect on what we want to do with our lives, and are we living a life of passion, and do we have purpose? And is there meaning in our day-to-day tasks and in our works, that the work that we're involved in? So that's extremely important.
Well, when I'm talking about, when I went through my, moments of reflection in a really deep way, that happened when I was 50, and you're talking about 23. So it does take some maturity that you must have had to, go down that path. And it sounds like, too, you were in a bit of a similar spot where you knew football was most likely over, number one, and number two, you're down in Alabama or someplace, and you're not surrounded with 8,000 different distractions, and really just keeping that focus on what you needed to do to really elevate yourself out of it. So in 1998, you decided to start this healthcare company, correct?
Yeah. It was interesting because, things happen to you, and, it's funny how things kind of play out in life, but I was back home recuperating from just getting off the road. I was back from Alabama. I was still kind of taking my time figuring things out, and I was in the kitchen making a sandwich, and my mom rolls in. She's fresh. She's on her lunch break. She rolls in, and she's getting ready to go back to work. And at that time, just a little bit of history on my mother. She was a caregiver. She came over to the United States from American Samoa. I'm half Samoan, half black, and she came over and she wanted to be a nurse, and she ended up starting a family, and she wasn't able to fulfill that dream of being a registered nurse. But the long and the short of it is she still was delivering care to seniors. She ended up working her way up in her organization, and she was a department head for Visiting Nurse Association. So she worked her way from the bottom all the way to the top. And as I was at home thinking about, okay, what is my next move going to be? I've just simply voiced it. Mom, I'm not sure what I want to do. She said, well, why don't you just start your own business? Why don't you just start a senior care company? And when she said that, I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, why not? Like, if I'm looking for employment, why not hire myself? And that was just a really pivotal moment in my thinking. It really changed my perspective, and I had a massive paradigm shift. I thought that I was a great asset to any organization that I could come into, because I wanted to contribute. I'm a team player, and that's what I love working with athletes, because they just have a different gear and they get it, right? But for me, I thought to myself, my mother's right. Why don't I just take a shot? I'm just going to hire myself. And I got to work literally that day. I got to work chipping away, figuring out what are the next steps. How do I set up a business? What is a business plan? I was familiar with all the aspects of starting a business from business school, and I just started from scratch.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And so how do you put together a roadmap on starting a senior care? Is it in home? Are you talking about going into hospitals?
Yeah, no, we're in-home care. So what we do, Mark, is we provide what's called private duty services. It's essentially cash-pay services for in-home caregivers. It's like a staffing company. And what's great about it is we're able to work with the healthcare professionals. I go into hospitals. I speak with physicians, nurse case managers, discharge planners, social workers. And as seniors or adults go into the hospital, receive treatment, they have to transition home. And when they transition home, they're going to need some additional assistance to help them with that transition. Sometimes it's temporary. Sometimes it's for an extended period of time. Sometimes it's indefinite. Basically, the first thing I did was I just did some market research. Okay, who are the players in the market? How big is the market? What's the opportunity here? What's the prevailing wage? What's the going bill rate? I started out with just the basics, and I was able to kind of MacGyver a business plan together and get it going.
That's incredible. So how long was it before you were able to start monetizing in a positive way? So there's the business plan phase, there's the idea, which you did, that called the seed, and then you moved directly into, implementing that plan. And then now you got to go out and not only talk to the people you talked about, but now you got to get your back end supply chain, which are the healthcare workers, to go out and put them in a position to get, find work, right?
Yeah, the first thing you do is you I remember I started off with a free sample. Like back in the day, they would send out, there was a company called Earthlink, right? They'd send out, or Hotmail. They would send out these CDs in the mail. They were orange and pink, and it was a free sample, like a free 30-day sample. And as luck would have it, one showed up on my doorstep, and I'm like, what the heck is this? So I go in, I plug the DVD in, and next thing you know, I'm on the interlink or the interweb or the internet. I'm like, what is this, right? And so I start punching in the search engines, job applications. So because I figured if I'm going to be a provider of jobs, right, I need employees. So I started collecting samples of applications, just job applications. And at night I'd sit and I'd carve them all up. I'd look at them and say, okay, this aspect I like, this one I don't, I'll keep this. And so I was cutting and pasting. So eventually I landed on the job application. Then I landed on, okay, what are the functions of a caregiver? What do they do? Then I started building out my scope, right? And then I started getting a better understanding of, okay, let me switch my gear here and think from the mindset of a consumer. What is a consumer looking for, right? So then I would build out my brochure. But as I trudged through that took me about 3 or 4 months to really, come up with my messaging, come up with a paperwork, etc. As soon as I finished that, I'm like, okay, it's time to hit the streets, right? Valuable information for anyone ever starting an organization or starting a business, or if you have a widget, a concept, a product. Go and interview the competition. Go and understand what's driving, your competitors. And that's the first, that was some advice my father gave me. He says, you go down and you sit with a businessman or a businesswoman, ask them, buy them lunch, ask them all about their business, and they will tell you they will tell you everything about their organization and what's made them successful. And what I did, Mark, is I started interviewing my competitors. I started sitting down and saying, hey, I'm a young guy, I'm just trying to learn the industry. Would you give me some pointers? It was I'm the new kid, help teach me, right? And it worked. And I took a lot of that feedback. I came back and implemented it into my business offering. And I think after the first year, within a year, I was in the black. I was hemorrhaging for several months, but putting money into the business and buying supplies, buying equipment, computers, and really studying the opportunity. Creating brochures, creating business cards, all of that, I was doing all of that, and then I would say about a year is when I started marketing, probably month 6 or 7, and at a year I had my full return on my investment.
That's incredible. That's a great story, and it's, again, you put a business plan together, and I think you also walk the walk and talk the talk, and I read a quote about you wouldn't do or ask anybody to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. And so you went out and became a certified nurse or health, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Trust me, I was the biggest guy in the skilled nursing facility. I'll tell you that much. I can appreciate that. But, I think it really helps because you're not just the arrogant CEO. You're the guy who's actually rolled up his sleeves and put yourself in the trenches, and so you can really identify with those people. And then, I'm sure those situations are difficult. My dad, unfortunately, passed away about 5-6 years ago, and he had a massive stroke and, just knocked out his communication grid. And I say this, it was a blessing actually that he passed away after 3 months because, he just lost his ability to walk and talk and write and function and all these other things. And so, but we did go down the path of transitioning him potentially from a hospital to in-home care. And it was just amazing what we found. It's expensive and it's a lot to it, but, each one of these situations are difficult to contend with. And I think I read that a lot of kind of the people that you deal with are dementia patients or other things like that where, it's hard on the family, but they definitely need somebody to come in and help assist. Yeah. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's a matter of when. We will all deal with this at one point or another. And with the Alzheimer's is growing at an alarming rate. I mean, we're having clients on service right now that are in their late 40s, early 50s, late 40s. I mean, it's just astounding the amount of care that needs to be delivered to aging adults and seniors. 90% of seniors above the age of 60 prefer to live at home. That's 9 out of 10 seniors, right? And so for us, it's blue ocean for us. I mean, there's a huge opportunity for us to grow our brand and grow our business within the senior care segment. It's the fastest growing demographic in the country as far as jobs. If you look at it, strictly from a job perspective, the number one fastest growing job in the country is a caregiver. And the number 2 fastest growing job is a CNA, a certified nurse's aide. So they're both caregivers. We think that in the years to come, it's going to be something that a lot of families are working through the challenges of this complicated healthcare system, and Medicare doesn't pay for it. So that further exacerbates the situation.
So somebody that needs your services, this is coming out of their pocket. Insurance does not pay. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. That's the way it is.
Not necessarily. There are a couple of things that you can do. Long-term care insurance pays for our service. Unfortunately, not a lot of Americans are familiar with long-term care insurance, but it's a great product. I bought my first long-term care insurance policy when I was 34, 35 because I was looking at the cost of care and how it's accelerating. But there is a product called long-term care insurance where you can buy it just like auto insurance. And if you have a unforeseen health episode or you have an emergency or something and the care need will last beyond 90 days, you can take this insurance out and it covers your healthcare expense in home.
So you grow, the name of your company, by the way, is Amada, correct? Amada Home Care?
Yeah, it's Amada Senior Care. Amada Senior Care.
Okay, Amada Senior Care. What does that stand for?
So Amada is a Spanish word. It means beloved. It means taking care of your neighbor. And there was a reason why we picked Amada. My first company, when I started by myself, it started with an H. It was Health Quest. And so I quickly realized when the case managers in the hospitals discharge families, they give a guide out. And typically that guide is in alphabetical order. So one of the lessons that I learned when we rebranded the company is the company had to start with an A because we were on the first page of the referral list, and it had to be something that had some meaning. So we landed on Amada because that's exactly what we do. We take care of others, and our mission is to just enrich the lives of the clients we serve, the sons, the daughters, our clients, and also our caregivers when we provide them with jobs. So my business partner was, I met him in college. He was my quarterback at University Pacific, and he's bilingual. And so when we were coming up with names to name the company, we landed on that. It made sense and it works.
Well, I read that you guys had a chance meeting in a pet shop, and, he wasn't even on the radar to be your partner or any of those things, and, he happened to bump into you. You happened after the pet shop, you're in a route or something to go on a call, and he had some time to burn, and so he decided to go along with you, and he was just like, hey, this is amazing what you're doing, and somehow or another you turned that around and said, well, why don't you come join me?
Yeah, that's how it happened. He actually bumped into my brother at the pet shop. He was buying dog food, and my brother was buying cat food, and my brother would come up and visit with me often, and so he knew my brother Fred, and he's like, hey, how's Tafa doing? And Fred's like, oh, he's amazing. He started this company, and he's doing well, and he'd love to hear from you. So they swapped contact numbers, and I reached out to him. We had lunch, and I took him in to go see one of our clients, and it was a gentleman who lived in Newport Beach, California, and the visit went on for about an hour and a half, and we sat down and we spent some time with this gentleman who was on hospice services, and he was an accomplished entrepreneur who was a real estate land developer, and he was winding down, and he was when you're at that point in your life and you're reflecting and you're having meaningful conversations, it gets very, very real. And so we just had a really good conversation with this gentleman, and he was sharing about his family and all that he's accomplished and some of the things that he'd do over in life. And I mean, it gives you a different perspective of what you've been called to do. And so I think that had a really big impact on Chad. And, I think it was like a month or so later, I called him up and said, you'd be the perfect business partner to help me grow the company. Why don't you come on aboard? And that was back in 2007. And so, it's been about 10 years ago.
Yeah, so now 10 years later, it sounds like you guys have seriously accelerated the growth of your company. And the thing that I read, I was just totally fascinated about, and I want to ask you, like, more in depth, exactly what you did to do this, was you decided to franchise out the opportunity. So what was that intellectual property, know-how, software? What was it that you were able to package it up and start promoting it and having people buy franchises in different cities?
We had decided we were having a lot of success here in Orange County, and we said, let's just go full scale attack. San Diego, Riverside, Los Angeles. We were ready to really grow the brand, and we made a lot of mistakes because when we were expanding, we were literally throwing cash at our expansion efforts, right? And whether it worked or not, we didn't care. We had the money to burn, and at a certain point, we're like, okay, are we going to get our return on our investment? And so we got burned on that deal. We kind of retreated back into Orange County. We said, okay, well, that did not work. We were trying to expand our company store with employees. And so we had another chance lunch with another gentleman who is my business partner now. His name is Jared. And he says, oh, guys, you made a huge mistake. You were trying to grow your brand the wrong way. He's like, what you need to do is you need to replicate it. It's like the McDonald's model, right? It's the Starbucks model. You need to replicate your processes and create policies and procedures and just do it over and over and over again. And I said, you know what? Franchising makes sense. And so we tried it. And our first franchise was in the Pacific Northwest up in Tacoma. And he literally blew the doors off in the first 2 or 3 years. And he's continuing to grow his business. Then we expanded down into Colorado with the franchisee. And he blew the doors off. And so we said, this works. That was back in we decided to franchise in 2012. 2013 is when we really started to pick up and start opening up territories. And now we're full steam ahead right now.
Yeah, how many franchisees do you have?
Well, right now we have technically we have 126 locations. We're in 42 states, but some of those locations are second territories. What happens is they're having so much success in some of the first territories, they're buying second territories. But as far as franchise partners, actual owners, we're in the 89 to 90 range with owner-operators that have either one or more territories.
Yeah, no, I get that. That makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, people are finding success just like they do with McDonald's franchises, and then they say, hey, I want to buy another one down the street, right? And they do that, and so they get multiple. So that makes a lot of sense to me. So where do you sit today? So how many employees? You still have the mothership, correct?
Well, no, the original store, we call it, we converted that into a franchise. So, we wanted to dedicate all of our time into franchising, supporting all of our units across the country. And so I travel quite a bit, visiting our locations, making sure that, they have the support that they need, and we're kind of fighting the fight with them. I mean, to this day, I love accompanying all of our locations, going on sales calls with them, really getting in the trenches and kind of working with them to build them up, but also build the brand up in that local community.
Yeah, I just love that. I mean, you're constantly reinventing yourself. You started at a younger age, and I want to go back to kind of like the core thing that this whole podcast is all about: finding your summit. People overcoming adversity and finding their way. And, the adversity that you had to kind of fight through is transitioning from high school. Where were you going to go? You ended up going to a JC, which then went to Pacific University, and then you got a free agency deal. But then, that's a lot of kids' dreams. That was my dream. And to have that shot, I was very fortunate to be drafted, and you went on as a free agent. And then you end up getting hurt. You get your big shot, and then you get hurt, and then it seems like life is over because you've worked, like half your life in athletics to become this certain thing, and then you just go right off that cliff. And so the question is, what are you going to do about it? And it takes a certain kind of mindset to elevate yourself and put yourself in a positive place in your mind to do something new and be open to possibilities. And that's what you did. You had that chance meeting with your mother in terms of voicing out loud what you wanted to do, what am I going to do? And she suggested something, and you took her up on that. And because you took a chance, because you went down that path, now, your life is, I'm sure, had so many just amazing blessings.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the total glass is half empty, half full. And even when you're having a bad day, you could be having a good day, you just don't know it. Because when you're having a bad day, there's always a lesson in everything that's bad in your life, So it's all perspective. It's all the way in the way in which you filter things, and a lot of it is mental. Everybody struggles, and I talk to a lot of the players that come out of the league, and they have struggles, and it's very, very difficult to kind of pull yourself out, especially if you've been around the game for a long time and you're used to stadiums, fans, in just that environment. It's very, very difficult to transition out of the locker room into the boardroom. And so for me, what I like to do is I really like to coach people up and say, hey, you have the skill sets, you have the talents to deliver in this business environment. You just may need to refine this or refine that, but constantly reinvesting in others is my business. It's caregiving is what I do, but really, creating an opportunity for others to kind of better themselves and better their lives is what it's all about.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, I think too, another thing that you're doing right now is you're doing this little thing called Paying It Forward. And you just mentioned that, about helping former guys who are transitioning be that ear for them and that voice of reason and just trying to help them grab clarity. And it's a wonderful thing that you've been able to give back, to many of the guys who are out there, whether they've played or not. A lot of people go through that. So Tafa, tell me this. Where can people find you?
Oh, well, they can find me, you go to AmadaSeniorCare.com. That's our company website. But they can also email me at Tafa, Tafa, at AmadaSeniorCare.com. I'm real big on answering questions, and, it's the old adage that it's the advice that my father gave me. You know, I'm more than happy to talk about my business and how football has played a great role in my life, and it was a catalyst for me to open up avenues and opportunities. But anyone that I can help, I'm more than happy to answer questions and help them out. But yeah, that's where they can find me.
Well, that's awesome. Well, where I found you is through the NFL Players Association newsletter, and I was so inspired by your story. I knew I had to have you on this podcast, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to interview you, hear your story, and find out how well you're doing in your successful transition from life after football. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and can't wait for this pod to run.
No problem, Mark. It was great talking to you, and we should get connected.
Let's do it. Absolutely. All right, Tafa. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, bud.
Hey, and thank you so much for listening to the Find Your Summit podcast. We are so glad to have you along for this journey. And if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend, share it on iTunes, spread it to the planet. We're looking to broadcast this to every person that is out there because, as you know, everybody has their own summit that they're going after. Okay, if you're looking to follow my journey, you can find that through my social links on markpattisonnfl.com. That's Mark, M-A-R-K, Pattison, P-A-T-T-I-S-O-N, NFL.com. So, until the next podcast, just remember, clear eyes, full hearts, and remember, it takes a little more to make a champion, so make it happen. Thank you. Bye.